Near the turn of the 13th century, a young man by the name of Giovanni Bernardone sat in intense prayer in a small church just outside the town of Assisi. He was discovering his faith, praying for guidance, when the figure of Jesus on the cross came to life and gave him a simple instruction: "Francis, rebuild my church which has fallen into ruins." Well, thinking that Christ meant for him to rebuild the old church where he sat, he immediately got to work. And so began the remarkable spiritual journey of the man we today call St. Francis of Assisi. He not only rebuilt the church at San Damiano, but several others, including a small chapel he called his Porziuncola, his little portion. In the process, he helped rebuild not only a church, but the church, the people of God, who saw in Francis the light and peace of Christ. Driven by the same call to serve the Lord, to rebuild the church literally and figuratively, the people of the National Shrine of St. Francis have followed in the footsteps of their patron. This is the story of the recreation of the Porziuncola in the heart of the American city named for St. Francis, San Francisco. This is the story of the Porziuncola Nuova. The Porziuncola Nuova is an exact scale replica of the revered little chapel in Assisi, Italy, where St. Francis found his faith, heard his Lord, established his order, and insisted on dying when his time came. This is the story of how such a unique piece of religious history came to be located 800 years and 6,000 miles away in San Francisco, California. The story begins, appropriately, with a vision of rebuilding a church.
This was the first church in the town that became San Francisco. So in that sense, we thought of making a shrine of St. Francis. Our patron is St. Francis after all, and not to reopen it as another parish church, but as a shrine church that could be of benefit for pilgrims.
In 1998, St. Francis of Assisi Church in North Beach became the National Shrine of St. Francis. But 7 years later, the Franciscan order decided to reassign the friars who ran it.
In 2005, we were really worried when the friars were leaving the National Shrine of St. Francis. I went to Archbishop Leveda, who is now Cardinal Leveda. And I literally sat with him for 4 hours, and I plotted out, we'll build Francesco's Porziuncola in the little gymnasium. Then we'll do the upper church, like the upper Basilica in Assisi, and then we'll do a university of political thought based on Franciscan principles in the rectory. And then number 4, we'll have a piazza. Cardinal Leveda got all excited about it. I mean, he said, you know, I'm gonna let you do this.
The key to the whole project was to build a replica of the chapel which would form the centerpiece and draw visitors from all over the world. Angela first visited Porziuncola when she was just 15 years old. Years later, when she got the idea to build a replica, there was a problem. No one was allowed to take pictures in the Porziuncola, and she didn't know any of the friars in Assisi who might help her get permission. But that didn't stop her.
The builders came with me to Italy. We divided ourselves up by 2, and we went into the Porziuncola and measured it with dental floss. We got on our hands and knees as though we were saying the rosary and measured the Porziuncola foot by foot. And then we'd go out, and Dave Murphy's son, Gavin, was sitting there with a big artist pad, and he had it all drawn out, and he was putting the measurements. He'd measure the dental floss and put the measurements on the drawing immediately because we couldn't mark the dental floss.
Word of what was going on in the chapel soon got back to the head of the friars, Frate Massimo Rescilian, and Angela got a phone call to come explain herself.
He said to me, "Come ti permetti? Who gave you permission? How dare you measure our Porziuncola?" And I just looked at him and did. And I think he saw my love of St. Francis and Jesus. He saw it, and he says to me, you know, during the earthquake, we had 3 rocks fall off the eastern elevation, and we believe these rocks were used by St. Francis himself in the rebuilding, and we would like to give you one for the cornerstone of our new little sister in America. I'm like having a heart attack inside. I am so excited, I can't stand it. You know, I've been visiting this little place my whole life, and all of a sudden, I'm rebuilding the only replica ever allowed in 800 years. I mean, it was mind-boggling. And on top of it, we're gonna have the highest Franciscan relic, Francesco's Rock. Every single symbol throughout this experience has been one of, this is going to happen.
The design process for the Porziuncola Nuova took place in 2 continents at the same time. Angela Aliotto took her team to Assisi to measure and photograph the original chapel, while back in San Francisco, architect Maurice Lombardo considered the construction options at the National Shrine of St. Francis.
So the first thing we do as the architects is we look at what drawings were available from the existing gymnasium, and then we go in and remeasure the building, as we call those as-builts. From there, then we start doing our schematic design, which is basically, you know, just the first process of designing the new building. At the same time, Angela was gathering all information, pictures, documentations.
What happened after my meeting with Frate Massimo in Assisi was a partnership. He sent us all the drawings. The original archive drawings from not only the Porziuncola, but the ones that were in the Vatican archives.
It's a new building, it's built to new structural standards and new architectural standards, but that's where the relation to new construction ends.
Obviously, we're in an earthquake-prone area, so we had to make this thing seismically resistant. So it took us a little bit of extra work to make sure that this little chapel fit inside this building. And of course, that's one of the reasons why we made it 3/4 scale. On the one hand, you wanted it to look architecturally correct. On the other hand, you want to be able to walk through it, because if you scale down exactly the way it was, 3/4 scale, you'd hit your head going onto the building. We had to do several design studies on how to break the paneling system down so that you could still walk through into the doorways, yet make it look like the original in Assisi.
We worked on lots of historic buildings over the years, but never anything quite like this, and I would imagine we probably never will build anything quite like this ever again.
We kind of look at everything short-term in the United States, but when you look at the quality of this building will outlast us for many, many generations. We're really excited to know that after we're gone, there's going to be this great little chapel that we had an opportunity to put into place that's going to be around for hopefully many, many centuries.
The exquisite reproduction of the Porziuncola frescoes is a work of Stefano Lazzari, his father Romolo, and his sister Francesca. Stefano came up with a method of using computer pixels and human artists to achieve the exacting detail necessary to recreate masterpieces.
La nostra riproduzione.
Our reproductions are very accurate, both in color and in substance, and most importantly, will stand the test of time. It's reproduced in such a way that it's very accurate in the mechanical phase and later finished by hand by master painters, and thus will last at least as long as the originals.
As with so many aspects of the Porziuncola project, Angela Aliotto's original meeting with Stefano occurred quite by chance, or more accurately, by providence. While at the Hotel Subasio in Assisi, Angela simply asked the concierge, who did the frescoes in the lobby?
He says, we know him very well. I'll give him a call. He calls Stefano, who's in Città del Castello, and says, Signora Angela would like to meet you. Stefano says, I had a dream that a person named Angela was going to call to meet with me. So he packs up that day, and I'm thinking, does this young kid realize he's taking on the masterpieces that are on this little masterpieces? Ilario di Viterbo altar place, the Perugino on the apse. I mean, these are masterpieces, the Overbeck on the facade of the Porziuncola. So it was yes, 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 yes. It just fell into place.
Come in questo caso noi abbiamo fatto gli affreschi della Porziuncola.
The reason that we were able to produce such faithful reproductions in this case was the fact that through the courtesy of the friars in Assisi, we were able to go to the Porziuncola dozens of times to do comparisons between our research and proofs and tests and the actual works.
I went up and visited their laboratory. These mammoth frescoes were all over this laboratory, and it was like it was almost like they were alive. Both Frate Giampaolo and I had a knot in our throats and had tears in our eyes. We didn't know what to say. What do you say when something is so gorgeous and so identical to something you know, like you know your children? I felt like the images in these frescoes are part of who I am. I've been around them so long. We got a magnifying glass. We were looking at, we could not believe how gorgeous they were. We couldn't believe it.
The completed frescoes then had to be carefully packed in shipping crates and transported from Italy to San Francisco. It was a nail-biting time, but the result was spectacular.
When arrived in front of the church, it was all the crew from Italy. It was Nibby, employer, with a crowbar, with a hammer. And when we opened those cases, it was just incredible.
It was almost like a finely tuned ballet performance.
Ok? Allora state dietro, mi raccomando, eh? Ok, alzate, alzate.
Everything has to be just so. And everybody on tiptoes.
When they carried the Overbeck facade fresco, when I just broke down crying. I cannot tell you, it makes me cry, how incredible it was. It was, oh my God. It's not only so real, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Everything arrived in great shape.
For me, it's a dream. It's a dream. Because we have no crash in the fresco. We have St. Francis in San Francisco.
My crew did it out of love. These artists did it out of love. These are people who love St. Francis and consequently Jesus.
How much of the Porziuncola Nuova resulted from good planning, and how much was simply the result of divine providence? Consider the story behind the beautiful marble floors, a unique type known as Pietra Rosa. On one of her trips to Assisi in 2006, Angela stopped to see a local art dealer.
He says, my brother Maurizio wants to talk to you. He has the only marble caves in Assisi, right, to get the red Pietra Rosa. So he put me in touch with Maurizio. I said, this is what I want. I want the red Pietra Rosa, just like in the Basilica of Santa Maria dei Angeli. He said, we don't have that anymore because of the mining of the caves behind Assisi. It made the city too unstable. And I said, okay, what do you have? And they had a white one, and it was okay. I said, you know, I'm really not happy with it. I'll get back to you. And then I went home, this was in April, and then at the end of April, I got a call from him. He said, you're not gonna believe this. I said, Maurizio, let me tell you something. I am absolutely gonna believe it, because as Frate Giampaolo says, quel Francesco. Let me guess, you have the Pietra Rossa. He says, there's a church in Foligno, which is the town right next to Assisi in the base of the valley. And they want the Pietra Rossa that has been on that floor for 600 years pulled up to put redwood floors. Would you like to have that? Marble. I got so excited. I said, oh my God, thank you, thank you. It was ridiculous. It just, everything has been providential, everything.
La doppia fascia, ne devi fare due. Questo è il mio laboratorio.
This is my workshop, where I work with various materials, including the red stone of Assisi.
La pietra parte in blocchi.
The stone arrives in irregular blocks. It looks like this. We take a block and cut it into panels or slices. Then we cut the edges and define the dimensions.
It took 2 months to lay it, and it took 2 weeks to polish it, and it was finished the night before our opening on September 27th.
Sono onorato.
I'm honored, very honored, because it's a beautiful thing. It's a unique thing, especially realizing the fact San Francisco, the name San Francisco, it's a call from the heart.
The lovely Umbrian stone adorning the Porziuncola Nuova literally tells the story of St. Francis. Shining gems buried within pauper's rags. It is a poor man's stone found strewn on a hillside, not taken from a valuable mine. It is a stone that appeared miraculously one day while Angela's team was driving near Assisi.
We found the hillside more or less by accident. We were driving down and he said, hey, stop the car. We've got some really good looking rocks up there.
I didn't want to pick just any rocks. I wanted rocks the same color and size as the ones on the Porziuncola.
It was almost as if someone had put a quarry of perfectly sized and perfectly colored stones there just for our taking.
So we loaded up these rent-a-cars, and we had so many rocks in them that evidently the car was touching the road and sparking, right? And Monty kept saying, we're gonna blow up, I said, please believe me, St. Francis is with us. We're gonna be just fine, Monty, just keep the faith.
We came back from Italy with suitcases full of rocks. I mean, it's almost a joke. What do you got, rocks in that suitcase? Yeah.
I took the rocks back to our shop, laid them out on tables, and kind of like a diamond, you figure out the ends that I wanted to use off of each rock and multiplied those rocks up to fill the void that I needed. I had about 8 to 9 stones and turned those into about 25 usable, 30 usable stones. I basically needed to understand the different rock entryways, how the door fit into that rock opening, how the window iron fit into those openings, how the back doors fit into the rock structure. I needed to feel the size of the stone, the undulation, the different widths and heights.
Another important moment was when we have to pick the altar. The challenging part was that at that time we already had the marble floor in. And now it become, how are we going to put it? We cannot drive a forklift. We're talking about 2,000 pounds. How are we going to bring it there? So I called Sheedy, a contractor, which is a crane, one of the biggest contractors in the city. I said, no problem. The pedestal is installed with dowels drill downs on the floor and put an epoxy down. And the same thing on the top. We drill the bottom of the top, and then with the thread the rod in, and we drop it in. So even that is not going to move from there.
Out of all the projects you build in 30, 40 years of your life, that this one will probably get seen more by somebody than anything you ever do.
That's not just a job. There's something that is going to stay there. You're going to bring your grandchildren. You're going to say, hey, I built that.
The rocks are so great. They're the living rocks. It was ridiculous how identical they are. And it was just like it is going to happen perfectly, and we are literally messengers and servants. We're literally servants in this whole thing. And when that rock matched that Porziuncola so perfectly, I so totally realized what a servant I was in this whole picture. It was absurd.
At each step along the way, it seemed as if St. Francis himself was intervening to make sure the replica of his Porziuncola was built in San Francisco. People simply appeared in Angela's life like manna from heaven. A chance acquaintance led her to Stefano, who felt called to reproduce the frescoes adorning the chapel. And the answer to another prayer, a master woodworker to replicate the intricate doors, furniture, and carvings of the Porziuncola, came from an unsolicited conversation with Stefano.
He says, come meet my friend Lucio. He does wood. I go, come meet your friend Lucio. He does wood. You know, everything just happened. It wasn't like I interviewed 30 people to do wood. I didn't interview anybody. They came to me, they took the job, and there is no way you could get frescoes like that for what we paid. There's no way you could get woodwork like that. This was all done out of a love of St. Francis that each one of these artists had. So I met Lucio. He got all excited and said yes.
Io sono Lucio Ducchi.
My name is Lucio Ducchi, and we are at Città di Castello, about 50 kilometers from Assisi, and we construct period furniture.
Abbiamo fatto rilevamenti sia fotografici che metrici.
We started to measure and photograph the actual pieces at the Porziuncola. At that point, we had to do some research to ascertain the techniques to faithfully reproduce the kneelers and the doors. Naturally, it was a simple but rigorous technique, much like St. Francis.
Abbiamo incominciato dalle porte. Le porte erano due.
We started with the doors. The main door was done with some very fine sculpting, done in a very hard wood, namely oak. While the second door is made from poplar and walnut. Part of it was sculpted while other parts of it were cut. The techniques are very similar between the two doors. They are both done with inlay. The main door was done in two phases. The basic physical construction of the door, and the second, the sculpting or cutting. We constructed the main door using the same techniques for both construction and ornamentation, and in the same dimensions. All made in Italy, and all made by the people, techniques, and tools of Umbria. Even the solvents, paints, and varnishes are all made here in Città di Castello. We've generated a door that is worthy of the original, and just as heavy as the original.
Allora, chi avrà la fortuna di essere stato ad Assisi a vedere la Porziuncola e
Those who will be lucky enough to first visit Assisi and see the Porziuncola, and then see the work that we have realized in San Francisco, will feel the same sensations of love and peace that they have here in Assisi.
Visitors to the Porziuncola Nuova marvel at the faithfully reproduced frescoes, stonework, and wood carvings. And rightfully so. They are truly masterful. But among the most difficult projects in the recreation of the chapel was one that often goes overlooked: the exquisitely detailed ironworks. Artisans down through the ages certainly had more experience with these materials than we do today, but Angela found the right person for the job: Eric Clausen.
Eric's an artist, and he's a small family business with his dad in Berkeley, and I knew that he could do this.
She called and said that she had a job that she was told couldn't be done, and it was making the ironwork at a seat for this Porziuncola. And I had no idea what she was talking about. So I came by and checked it out, saw the photographs, and said, oh yeah, this is right up my alley. I can do this. I've always loved to work the old style blacksmithing. For many years I burned coal in my forge instead of using gas, and I used to weld in the forge with hammers, and I love the traditional methods.
That gate on the altar is phenomenal, the one that he created for us. It's a very difficult gate to produce in 2008. I mean, it's really medieval.
To make an exact match in every detail, Eric needed more than just measurements. Even photographs didn't provide enough three-dimensional information. So project manager Alfonso Rocciola came up with an ingenious solution: Play-Doh.
When I was in Italy, I got some Play-Doh, and with the Play-Doh I made the print of the design. When we came back, then I showed to Eric. He looked at it and said, no problem.
I took these dimensions and I worked off of those. I made these medallions by turning a die on the lathe and making a die that would stamp them in a big press, and then another die to cut them out. When I was bending the curves, the wavy bars on the railing, I thought maybe I could make a shortcut. And I made some dies, some stamping dies with the curve, and I put the material in there and went to press it in a hydraulic press. The metal snapped. It couldn't take the pressure because it had to stretch so much. They're so wavy. They're just too wavy for that. So I thought, okay, I'll heat them up and I'll do them hot. And when I did them hot, they stretched so much that it still snapped. So I had to hand bend each one. I hand bent every bend on there. The windows in the back gate are a very traditional method of piercing. So the intersections run through one another. The piercing is done hot with a chisel. You split the material with a chisel, you run it through, and then you take a round drift and spread it apart so the material swells and opens and creates a hole, and the bars run through one another. This creates this nice grid that the back gate is formed of. The medieval bars on the windows are very simple. They're just one or two verticals with bars running through them. To put the bars in the stone, we figured out a way where we could insert the bars first and then they would put the stone around them, rather than trying to insert the material into the stone. It was almost impossible. So this worked out the best. We put the bars in and they worked the stone around the bars. That ensures that they're in there good and solid.
Those two medieval windows on the west elevation that are incredible.
I always feel that the ironwork is like the seasoning. If you cook a steak, when you put on some seasoning or sauce or whatever, that's what the ironwork is. It's what makes it, in my opinion. You can't do it without the ironwork.
Oh, the reactions are so great. The reactions are everything from to immediate on your hands and knees, to immediate on your knees, tears, a lot of tears, because it represents the compassion of St. Francis and consequently of our Lord. And people feel that. I don't know what, I was thinking, who's going to take care of this little place? And believe me, it's going to be taken care of like it's a, the most precious jewel in the world. So I created the Knights of St. Francis of Assisi. We're now 140 strong. We have not missed one day of protecting, guarding, and sustaining financially the little Porziuncola. We open every day at 10 and close at 6, and we have had hundreds of thousands of people come through, and even some converts, which is very important to me.
Not only is it the Knights being available and having those doors open to people, but also that love that they have inside them really just welcomes people in. They see their faces from the door and they just come in because they know it's a loving place.
They really do it from the kindness of their hearts. And to have a fledgling organization like that in San Francisco, California, across the world from Assisi is just amazing. And that it's grown so quickly really shows the power that the Porziuncola has when it embraces somebody.
I laugh all the time because people say to me, I don't know what happened to me. I started buying missions, or I don't know what happened to me, but I packed up my whole family and went to Assisi. I so know what happened to them. It is a feeling that you have to go back and have more of. And that's what I get, and what a lot of people get at the Little Porziuncola in San Francisco. It's a feeling of joy and love, knowing that the world's going to be okay because there are people like St. Francis alive, and there are people taking care of each other, and there are people living our Lord's words of the gospel, and so everything's going to be okay. And that's what the Little Porziuncola says to everybody.